All right, so I'm Greg Abel. I'm the CEO of Abel Communications in Baltimore. We're a public relations firm. I am really thrilled to welcome a great panel today. Most of both friends and journalists who I've known a long time. I'll just kind of introduce each person real quickly and their title. We have Katie Rossman from the New York Times. We have Amy Argetsinger, who's the style editor from the Washington Post. Maybe just put your hand up when I think it shouldn't be that hard to figure out who's who. If you have the names, you should have it. I didn't mention Katie's role as she's a features reporter at the Times. Joanna Sullivan, the editor of the Baltimore Business Journal, and Alan Klein, the editor-in-chief of American Banker. So I'll start out with a question for everyone, and as you answer, maybe just give a little bit of background on your role at your publication. And I'm just going to ask, what's it like to be working in the news business right now? And let's start with Joanna. What's it like to work in the news right now? Joanna, what's it been like for you?
Trying to unmute. Okay.
You did it. You're good.
Okay. It's never been crazier. On that one Friday before the state shut down everything, we realized that we had to start working from home. I never thought I'd still be here 6 weeks later in my kitchen running the paper. So it's been, nonstop weekends and nights, and there's so much news. And our niche publication, caters to businesses, and businesses have never needed more information than they do right now. They're trying to survive.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Al. How about you?
I'm Alan Klein. I'm the editor-in-chief at American Banker. Yeah, like Joanna said, to me, it's akin to covering the financial crisis from 2008, 2009. The news is coming at you so fast all the time. But the difference, of course, is that we're doing it from home while, a lot of us are homeschooling our kids at the same time too, and that's been a challenge. And the thing I've been actually thinking a lot about is burnout. Like that for a lot of reporters, the days start so early, the days end so late, and you just have to make sure that they're not working too much, and they get burnt out, because there's really there's no beginning, and like Joanna said, we're working weekends, we're working nights. There's like no beginning or end to the days. So it's really it's a lot to manage.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling that way.
It's not unique to journalism, right?
Yeah, no, I'm just empathizing, because I think in communications roles and others that have, you would think that disruption would mean, well, maybe there's less to do, but it feels that there's more, which is kind of interesting. Amy, how about you? Will you talk a little about your role at the Post and what this, time has been like?
Yeah, I am a editor, not the editor. A editor for the style section, which, to be clear, because a lot of people aren't. It's, it's kind of a general arts, culture, society, long form features section. Despite the name, we've only have one fashion writer. It's not about fashion per se. It's been kind of an extraordinary time. We got this sudden announcement on March 10th that we had to start working from home the next day. And for a while, there were 3 top editors who still had to go into the office. What was remarkable was that we quickly found that nobody needed to be in the office. We're all doing pretty well in a work from home situation. There are even fewer people at the newsroom than there were initially. And yet somehow this paper continues to get put out every day. It's been a shift in terms of how to deal with my reporters. Kind of realizing we need to do more outreach, because we don't have the casual, hey, how you doing? Walk by the desk thing. It's been funny, because we're all operating in these weird little personal silos, and we don't have a whole lot of sense of what the rest of the world is doing. I kept trying to tell people this is a marathon, not a sprint, but everyone was in sprint mode for like a month. Yeah. They were writing too many stories because of a sense that we have to do this story now, because in 2 weeks there might be bodies in the street, and then we'll have wasted this opportunity to do an interesting story now. I think we're now realizing we could have paced ourselves better on a lot of stories, and we're all just trying to find the new equilibrium.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Amy. And Katie, how about you? I think.
You know, it has been hard to figure out the rhythm, and I'm on the style desk at the Times, which is similar to how Amy described it, as being sort of a broad how do we live section. But I've also been contributing to the national desk, and it's hard. It's sort of a weird juxtaposition for me, because it's a lot of serious stories and then stories that are meant to not necessarily entertain, but take a different view on how things are impacting the culture. But yes, any thought that you know, if we don't do this story now, the moment's going to be over. We're seeing that the moment isn't over, and it's unclear, you know, when it's going to end and if it's ever really going to distinctly end. So just trying to get a sense of that sort of pacing, as I think probably everybody is in their job, no matter what it is.
Yeah, I think one of the questions I wanted to ask everyone about was just how you're deciding what to cover right now. And there's a lot of marketing and PR folks on the call, and I think everyone's curious, like, what are the factors that impact what you decide to write about, and how do you make those decisions, especially in this environment? So anyone can comment on that one.
Do you want me to start with that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think a lot of our coverage, and Alan's probably doing the same thing, has been on the PPP loans, who's getting it, which banks are helping them get that money. We've seen a lot of interest from our readers in that. They want to know, you know, how a lot of instructional journalism, more than we typically do. You know, this is how you get that loan. This is how you apply for that grant. That has really resonated with our readers. But we're also seeing a lot of good stories about how companies are pivoting to adapt and survive. So we're following 8 businesses. We've been following them for the past month. And we're going to continue to follow them to see how they're doing. You know, this week we did an installment on who got money. So I think money and funding is one of the most important things we're seeing our readers want to know about. But we also want regular general business news. We see that our readers still need that. There's some deals still being made, some leases being signed. So we're still trying to follow our, you know, typical stories as well. And they're doing as well with readers, because people really want to know other, you know, non-corona news as well.
Right.
Yeah, like Joanna said, for us, you know, anything going on with these federal programs is, you know, that's what people want to read about, the PPP in particular, but there's other programs out there as well. And, you know, my audience is the banking industry, and the banks are right in the middle of it. And they've seen a lot of glitches in some of how these programs are being rolled out, because they were put in place so quickly. And they want to know what's happening with it. You know, can they get in? Who's having trouble? You know, that feels like anything related to the PPP right now is top of mind for all of our readers. And then, you know, pretty soon they're going to roll out this other program for the mid-sized companies, and we expect that will get the same kind of interest. You know, right now we aren't seeing a lot of interest in stories unrelated to the coronavirus, because the banks are so in the middle of implementing all of this and really helping their customers too, because a lot of people are, you know, they can't make their loan payments. They're struggling financially. So banks are being asked to really step up and you know, waive fees and forgive, let people skip loan payments, things like that. So, you know, there's just a lot. You know, if it's not related to corona right now, there's just not a lot of interest.
I would say that I think we're seeing kind of, I hate to say light at the end of the tunnel, but I think on the horizon, we're not too far from having quote unquote normal stories. It's just, you know, you can't quantify it. You can't say what exactly it is or what you need, but it's just kind of a gut feeling of, you know, a story that's just going to feel right or not. It's, you know, it's hard to say. You know, we're a newspaper. We are covering, you know, daily life and normal life and everything like that. And when all of normal life is swept up in these extraordinary circumstances, well, then there's just, it's kind of a moot point as to whether, you know, we're open to normal stories. You know, we're writing about the world as it exists now, and this is what we have right now.
Right.
Thanks, Amy. My video went out for a minute, so that freaked me out. I just logged back in.
For a while it said that
Anyway,
I'm the host.
I'm back. Geez, that was weird. Katie, did you get a chance to address the question of kind of how you're choosing what to cover? Maybe share a little bit about what we have been covering.
Well, so I've done one story that is sort of a little bit of an outlier in terms of the world of Corona, and it was a story that I had pitched before all of this happened, which was about this organization called A Second You that helps train nonviolent parolees to become personal trainers in the fitness industry. And it just, I was very compelled by the guy who was running the organization, and it makes a lot of sense because fitness is something that you can, you know, come out of prison having an aptitude to and for, and it's sort of it's a path to employment. So I thought this was a really good story in January, and I had a bit of a queue and said, I told the guy I would get to it in probably April. And in April, I reached out to him and said, obviously, I'm not going to be able to do this story for a while, but don't give up on me and don't lose hope or patience, because I really do want to do it. And he said, you know, it's interesting because we're working with our clients, meaning the people that they're training over Zoom now, as so many in the fitness industry are, but we're helping to talk to them about the skills of dealing with confinement and isolation that we all, you know, had to gather with years of incarceration. And I thought, you know, wow, maybe I could do this story now.
Yeah.
So we did do it now, and we didn't overdo it. I hope we tried not to. We thought, you know, we said, let's tip our hat to it and connect it in the headline and sort of have a couple tips in there from these fellow inmates, and then just tell the story. And we did, and I think it worked well. And it was a popular story. A story like that is not going to blow up online, because if you're not on the news right now, it's not going to get the promotion that it needs, and it's not going to, just, people are reading so much news that they absolutely need to be reading right now that it can be hard to break through the news cycle. But I felt good about it. I felt like it was not quite counter programming, but something a little bit adjacent.
Right.
And otherwise, I'm just looking for stories that connect to how people are living through this moment, which is really always what I try to do, depending on what the moment is. So I had a story last week about whether summer camp was likely to, sleepaway summer camp was likely to take place, and sort of what's going on right now, what camp directors are facing. And then I had a story the week before about Corona shaming. I saw one person that I'm Facebook friends with who called George Stephanopoulos out for being in a pharmacy, given that his wife has been very sick and had been had been posting about being sick. And I thought, wow, you know, there's a lot of people in the news business who are feeling very relevant because they're sharing these first person stories. But the flip side of it is everybody knows that you or your family have it or have been exposed to it. And so
Right.
I did a story about Corona shaming that really did get a large readership.
You know, I think a lot of the people joining this would be really interested to kind of understand too, if they have to always reference coronavirus in anything they would suggest to you to cover. In other words, like, hey, let's say you work at a company or an organization, and someone at your company or organization is doing something remarkable that is unrelated. And I think the challenge is that everything is at least sort of tangentially related right now. But I think the question, I'm actually asking Amanda Gluck's question from the Q&A, is like, does everything have to reference coronavirus right now?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the strength of your pitch is going to rise and fall. The success of your pitch is going to rise and fall on its own strength. And I think reporters are capable of connecting the dots. Obviously, I think we're all on the hunt for things we haven't thought of already, things that haven't been written about already that have been affected by the pandemic crisis. But don't lean into it too hard. It's don't try too hard. I've seen some pretty bad pitches. We actually have been keeping a little file of the most contorted coronavirus pitches.
You mean the biggest twist you had to make to get from coronavirus to the story they're trying to pitch? Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's
there are some pretty banal products that there's a lot of hey, these are perfect work from home socks or whatever. I can't even, I'm not even gonna go into any of these things, but it's like
right.
It's kind of amusing from this end when you see, anyone in our field is getting so many email pitches from PR people we don't even know at all on any given day, and
sure.
So it can be pretty ridiculous.
Well, what about the other side of that, Ben? What are the good pitches that you find relevant and interesting to follow up on?
Me?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah,
if everyone could take that, just sort of like if someone has given you a tip that you found useful, maybe give an example of something that was useful and could encourage our listeners to act in the same way.
I don't take a ton of pitches. I like to make relationships with people in communications and sort of be able to, we can tap into each other's brains, but just regular pitches over email tend to not result in stories that I report. There are exceptions to that, I'm sure, but it's a difficult position you all are in, because it's very unseemly to be promoting people and products in a way that is connected to the news right now, when the news is that tens of thousands, if not much more people are dying. And it does I've gotten, early on, I got a couple pitches that really they made me mad. They did. It just was, I was just like really, really turned off. But as this has gone on, I think we all know that everybody needs to do their job, and that we all want businesses to be able to continue to stay in business. And I don't just mean you all as professionals, but the companies that you're representing. But I guess the tonal thing really matters. And for me, the best thing is to be able to reach out to somebody and say, I'm thinking about a story about this. Who do you have? And what comes to mind? Do you know any companies? Do you know any people? And that I'm absolutely doing. But the incoming, it's a tough moment for people whose job it is to pitch. I completely get it. And
yeah, some of the clients we work with, a lot of the communication that's happening right now can be done other ways. There's always your blog, and there's email, and there's social media. And so companies who want to promote something need to do so in the proper context. And the media relations side of it can have a particular place, but it doesn't have to be the default for everything. And I think that's ways in which I think companies can make their people and experts available, and by letting you all know, we have so-and-so who's an expert in, whatever that topic is. And if they're findable online, maybe that's more useful.
Yeah.
I don't want to stay too long on the good pitch, bad pitch thing, but I want to kind of change to a different kind of question of, I'm really interested in, like, I know the newsroom is a place that has a certain feel, and there's a certain energy in a newsroom, and that's, I'm assuming, much different right now. And how has it been like for you all to work remotely and collaborate in this environment? I think everybody's trying to figure that out. I'm curious what it's like in the news business right now. And then as a follow-up to that, is anyone going out, or any of you leaving the home to report stories?
The team of reporters that I oversee currently are media reporters. And we just had someone go out for the first time. And this is Margaret Sullivan, who's our columnist, and she went to interview David Muir of ABC News. And we had to get permission. I had to get permission from someone about 3 levels above me to let her do that. And she said, does Margaret have a mask? Does she get a mask? She was, of course, going to go meet this guy in a studio that's basically empty because everyone's working from home. They ended up doing the interview sitting on park benches 6 feet apart with masks on. It was different. But that is literally the only one of my reporters. Other people on the staff, one of our reporters went out to cover a wedding that happened outside, like in the middle of a neighborhood block on Capitol Hill. So, she was there, but again, it was, the whole point was that it was a social distancing wedding. And so she was social distancing with the rest of them. But, in general, it's like no one's going anywhere. Everything's over phone. Everything is over Zoom. You need strict permission if you're going to go anywhere. But I can tell you, the reporters are ready to go places. They're looking for excuses.
Yeah. Hey, Joanna, how about for you in business news? Are people leaving, or is all reporting being done from the home?
Mostly from the home. I mean, I've been out taking pictures of different things, and but mostly, it's from the home. The reporters are talking to people. People don't want to meet with you in person. We had to get our photographer in to shoot photos for our 8 businesses, and we had to follow a lot of strict protocols at each business, and we could not go inside most of them. So we took like outside shots, or arranged for, ways that we could get them at a distance, and some were wearing masks as well. So we've been reporting from home, and all of our subjects pretty much are home.
Sorry, Joanna.
No, go ahead, Alan. What are you seeing from the banks?
I think so far, in terms of everyone's really willing to collaborate, and so working from home hasn't been that hard. There's so many ways to communicate with Slack and phone and Zoom and everything. So we're all collaborating, probably more than we even had before. I guess my concern is, long term, the office environment is so great for just those accidental interactions, and I can't tell you how many times I have just overheard a conversation and then was able to chime in with some advice on a story, and how to present it, maybe who to talk to. And you don't get that now. And that's just one small example. I mean, and I guess the longer this goes on, we're going to lose some of that. And I do hope that we get to a point where we are getting back to an office environment soon, because in journalism, that kind of those daily interactions, I think, are very important.
Yeah, Katie, you want to address that? I know you tell us about that. You work in New York, but you report from. I think you do, and if you're comfortable sharing a story of how it's been for you with that.
Yeah. Well, we have a morning meeting on video chat that I find annoying. I show up for, but it's, whatever, everybody's doing their best. But I got sent to Seattle in mid-March to help the national desk cover the outbreak there. And it was right before, I think, everybody quite realized what a bad idea it might have been to send me to Seattle in mid-March. But New York City public schools were still in session. It was in that moment of very mixed messages from our government and our leaders. Everybody was making individual decisions. So I flew out there, I think it was maybe March 15th, around there. And it was really the most harrowing assignment I've ever had, and purely the travel and the logistics. And I did not have a single person who was willing to meet me in person. So I flew to Seattle and reported from a hotel, mostly on the phone. But I also, I was able to walk around, and I did happen upon one anecdote that I would not have gotten from the phone. It was, I saw something happen on a sidewalk, and I started asking the people, and it was a wonderful anecdote. And I think it was a good reminder to me, not that I necessarily need reminders, but that it's the unexpected things that happen, not only when you leave your house, but, I think there's way too much reporting that goes on the phone and at desks in the newsroom during normal times. So it's not just an issue now, I think, as we are increasingly, able to do everything over all these technological tools. I think younger reporters also, especially, I don't want to be like the old hag waving my finger at younger people, but, getting out does make a difference. However, right now, I feel like I'm reading incredible coverage that obviously everybody's doing from the phone or Zoom or whatever else. And I don't feel like there's a lot that I'm missing. And then you have these incredibly brave reporters who are going into hospitals and doing things that just are very important and must be scary and harrowing. And I saw, it's funny because I love Margaret Sullivan and just think she's an incredible reporter and person. And I saw her pictures of her and David. She posted a picture on Twitter, and I, of course, was like worried, are they sitting far enough apart? I mean, it almost can become, not quite a distraction, but its own little thing where you're, just sort of, would I do that? And are they sitting far enough apart? And does her mask have the pleats in it? I was worried about her.
Fashion is going to become a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And and you want to make sure you're not taking an unnecessary risk just to get the Dateline, which with the stories, I did 2 stories from Seattle, and I don't think it was like, let's send her out there just to get the Dateline. But the result was, but for one anecdote, which was not even the lead of my story, I got a Dateline because I got on a plane, which was scary to do, and I was the only person staying in the hotel, and the hotel wouldn't give me any food. It was very nerve-wracking. But anyway.
I find myself looking at a lot of other people's stories and thinking that have no Dateline, that have obviously been done over the phone, and thinking it's like, well, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
We saved a lot of money on this story, and could it have been better? I do also find myself like trying to reverse engineer. Like we've had some wonderful, deeply reported stories, and find myself thinking it's like, did they really manage to pull that detail that would typically be something observed? Did they really pull that out of an interview? I guess so. It's an interesting.
People are more accessible right now. That is one thing we're finding. If people are at home, they're giving you their cell phone numbers, and they seem, I don't know, maybe they have more time. They're not traveling as much, and we've definitely found people much easier to reach.
I want to ask you all about the criticism the media has taken too, that there's too much coverage of coronavirus, and that people who want to throw stones are saying that a lot of the angst in the world is brought about because there's so much coverage. And I know that's a difficult question. I'm curious your take. Has it, Amy Argetsinger's
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really annoyed by the argument that this is some kind of media hoax, because the industry that's been really hurt by this is the media. Listen,
Yeah.
Katie and I are very lucky to be working for probably the only 2 daily newspapers in the country that have not been financially affected. But this industry, if I stop to think about it, it is maddening. And this is something any PR professional is going to need to be aware of. There are layoffs and furloughs and entire sections being cut. There are newspapers that are not going to survive this. It has been deadly for local and regional print journalism. I mean, it's just so. I mean, if the media is, and listen, for glossy magazines in New York too, it's advertising has just gone through the basement, and if this is a media hoax, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, we're used to being blamed for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be thrilled if in 3 months everyone was like, that was overkill, nothing. The point has already been proven. I mean, it is not there, not to be crass, but there are, bodies in trailers that can't even get buried because of the sheer volume of death. So the idea that it's overblown, I think, has already been disproven. And you're a little bit, as somebody in features, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you do a story that isn't related to the virus or even takes a lighter look, and you get very often attacked for that also, of nothing better to report, Katie, than what socks people are wearing when they work from home. So
the economic fallout of this is serious, and I think in Joanna, we cover business, and the impact on business is, I mean, some of these businesses are not going to survive, and I think many businesses are not going to survive, and they need information on how they can get through this and navigate it on the other side. So I mean, I don't know how you can call this overkill. I mean, this is the biggest crisis many of these companies will ever face. I mean, Joanna, are you seeing that?
Yeah, we're already seeing restaurants that are saying we're not reopening, we're done. After one this week, we reported on 86 years and they're closing, they're not going to come back.
Right.
So it's so real, but you do hear people who say, and I'm starting to see it even among our readership, oh, well, maybe, Governor Hogan, the Maryland governor's going too far, or maybe we shouldn't be closed. Maybe we should start opening up. But at the same time, you see on, if you're on Facebook and you have relatives who share crazy right-wing sites, they're celebrating the South Dakota governor. They're saying, oh, they're throwing her a parade because she kept everything open. So people are not reading everything that we're reading, and not seeing that because they're choosing other publications or websites.
Yeah.
I will say, as the media editor, I may have kind of a bit of a meta approach to this question. I remember vividly back in February, one of my reporters saying, do you think we should do a story about, is the media overhyping this coronavirus thing? And I said, well, why don't we wait and see how bad this thing turns out to be. 2 months later, he said to me, he's like, should we do a story about how the media didn't take coronavirus seriously enough early on? And I'm like, I'm young enough to remember when you pitched me the opposite story. So, I mean, yeah, it's like media reporters are, counting the angels dancing on the head of a pin when it comes to this, but
so
yeah.
we have a lot of folks interested in making sure their businesses do remain relevant so that they can survive, and they would like your attention in a way that is relevant to the moment. So any advice for folks in terms of how they can make their people, their products, their services relevant and relatable right now? without kind of appearing tone deaf? I think everybody's afraid to appear tone deaf. So feedback.
I do. I think people really need to turn to social media and let the market decide how compelling and interesting and important their story is right now, and the journalists will follow. But you know, a lot of what we're doing is about, I mean, we always do, and I think a lot of publications do, about what's connecting with people via social media. And I think that you know, I get so many pitches where I'm like, this is not a New York Times story, possibly ever, certainly during this crisis, but you know, tell it yourself, tell it in an interesting way and get that message out. And if then, you know, we find that this is something that's resonant with people, then it becomes a layered story that's not just promotional and can sort of speak to why this is connecting with the culture. I mean, if you look at, this is just one example, but the Steakums Twitter feed, I don't know if anybody's been following it. It's like brilliant and hilarious, and like, they're like, I don't know who's doing it, and I'm sure there has been a story about it and I haven't read, but they're sort of, you know, using these tools in different ways, and at a time when people are very used to seeing homemade coverage, DIY coverage, whether it's, you know, this Zoom chat or seeing, you know, all these newscasters broadcasting from their living rooms. I think businesses should be, you know, taking some of the onus on themselves to tell their own stories, see what connects, and then see if the press wants to amplify it.
That's good advice. Thank you.
I think they need to forget about spin too. Like, what's really working is people being very honest. You know, everyone's scared. You know, we have business people who never used to open up, and they're opening up about their own fears. So I think they have to just be willing to talk about their finances, be willing to talk about, you know, what their employees are going through.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joanna. Al, did you have a?
No, Joanna said it well.
All right, I want to, when we have, also programming note, just for fun, Al Klein, myself, and Joanna all worked in the Baltimore Business Journal newsroom in the 90s together. So just, we're dating ourselves.
My first job.
Al's first.
And then Alan and I worked together at American Banker.
That's right. Joanna hired me.
And I'll get in trouble at home if I don't acknowledge that my wife Jennifer is friendly with Katie and Amy.
Thank you.
So, all right. I also want to encourage the attendees to start using the Q&A button. We've gotten a couple come in, and we'll start addressing some questions.
Greg, you see there's a question that came in through the chat.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Let's address that. Okay. So, do any of you have an opinion on professional sports and how they are viewing opening back up without spectators, professional golf, baseball, football, pro and college, etc.? And how do you envision sports media covering the events if that were to happen?
I'm a little out of my depth here. I can't speak to what an editor in a very separate section, very separate vertical would be doing. I would think that there would be some degree of comfort with covering these games in person. You know, what you're talking about, especially when there are no spectators there, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of extreme social distancing, especially open air things. You know, I think the question becomes, you know, locker room interviews or whatever, probably. But I mean, then I think it's also a larger question of, you know, how are sports teams going to handle locker rooms in general, whether you have media in there or not. I would think, you know, especially outdoor events, especially, you know, things where there are not huge crowds. I would imagine there's a lot of possibility for reporters to ease back into in-person visits there. That's just my guess.
Anyone else want to address that one? If there's sports, you know, if there was talk for a little bit of time, I don't know how real it was, of Major League Baseball pulling all the teams and players together in Arizona after people have been tested, and then so you have, you know, to the extent that you can, a safer environment, and then all the games will be played in a few stadiums with no fans. And I thought that was interesting and bizarre. I don't know how much they're still talking about it, but how do you all think the media would respond to such a thing?
I mean, I think the media will cover what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, if competition is taking place that is, you know, regulated by the leagues and counts towards whatever things, you know, championships they're going for, I think I would assume that they'll get covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
I mean, the NFL draft showed us. The NFL draft showed how popular any kind of sporting related event might be. You know, people are kind of desperate to watch something.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting thing. One of the questions I wanted to get to are some of the biggest takeaways, like how people are feeling, what are common themes. I think, you know, one of the things you know, I'm a sports fan. I'm missing the day-to-day of getting to watch a ball game. And it would be nice if there was I was even kind of thinking, like, I know that, I think it's Taiwan's, their professional basketball league is playing. And I was like, why isn't someone broadcasting that? I would watch any competition right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's not years old.
I don't know, that watching the 1977 World Series was like the most entertainment I've had in a month.
The Yankees won.
You could come see my kids fight over who has to clean the kitchen if you're that interested.
Right. Okay, we're getting some more questions coming in. How about, does anyone have thoughts around travel? Is it tone deaf and insensitive to start showing readers places they can visit once it's safer? Or do you think it's too far out of people's minds now and won't resonate?
I think coronavirus is going to continue to be the subtext, if not the text, of any travel story for some time to come. It's, you know, there's not going to be any, let's pretend things are normal, let's look to the future for a long time. Having said that, I think that's certainly an area where there's going to be a push for getting back to normal, ways we can get back to normal, trips you can do that are not getting on a plane. I think the market is going to demand a lot of that. Certainly, you know, travel sections are fairly lucrative relatively for newspapers. And these sections are kind of trying to find their way. I mean, we're still doing our travel section. I think the Times has folded theirs.
Yeah, the Times temporarily, you know, temporarily suspended travel, and that staff is now putting out a weekly section called At Home, which I think also is very service oriented, with the other journalists who were talking about all this sort of like news you can use, whether it's in your home or in your business. There's a big premium on it. And I think you want to be careful about recommending. You don't want to be recommending. I mean, a lot of travel is you should go here. It's like, well, you're assuming a lot of variables in recommending something as a journalist that you never would. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a slippery slope. However, I got an email today from United Airlines saying I can get refunds on any travel. Well, I don't want to say what it said because it wasn't completely clear to me, but I was thinking, wow, should I be making tickets right now? I bet they're cheap. And what could I, you know, should I not be able to travel within a year? What sort of refund could I get? Like, I'd love service about how to, you know, sort of make the most of this moment, looking to the future and what guarantees I could get. I mean, I think there's a lot of room for things like that, but purely feature travel of, you know, 3 days in Barbados is probably not something you can responsibly pitch or write right now.
How about, here's another one from the Q&A from Todd. Have the features writers thought about talking to some of the essential workers that have been overlooked, like maintenance techs, site level staff at apartment communities, people who keep residents safe while keeping communities going? Is there a better way to pitch that story?
I think that's a good story. I think we've done variations on that. I wouldn't think of it as a features story, especially, you know, the kind of sections Katie or I work for. I think, you know, there can be some compelling long form feature take on that, but in a way, I think I would direct a story like that to you know, what we call the Metro reporters, who are perfectly capable of writing a feature story that's not a hard news breaking news story, you know, a trend story, if you will. Yeah, I mean, I think, we've done a lot of stories about, grocery store workers and delivery people. I think the examples you're raising are good ones because these are a little more invisible, and it's something I've thought about a lot. And yeah, the kind of the invisible essential. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good story. And if you have a good example, I would look to pitch. You want to sort of, it's not just, okay, what about these people, but then it's also so here's what, here are the examples, here are all the categories you're not writing about, you're not thinking about, and then finding the right reporter to bring that up with. I mean, and yeah, I think it's definitely a story with potential.
All right, I want to make sure we keep getting to a few other questions before we run out of time. What are your thoughts on advertising in general? As you mentioned, a lot of companies have pulled back, but given the amount of media consumption taking place, there's certainly opportunity for certain industries. Depending on the content, could advertising, as usual, be viewed as tone deaf and offensive, or is advertising kind of has the same challenge that communications professionals have? How do we keep promoting services without appearing tone deaf?
I mean, if you want to advertise in the Washington Post, we're not going to complain that your ad didn't mention coronavirus. I mean, I open up our weekend section and I'm so happy to see the full page ad, which is the one ad in the section that's for the duct cleaning guys or whatever. It's, there are, yeah, I wouldn't sweat that too much. I don't think consumers are going to be bothered by it. I definitely can tell you that media organizations are not going to be bothered by it. If you can buy an ad, for God's sake, please do.
Now's a good time.
You'll probably get a bargain.
Yeah, I would think so. There usually are companies and verticals that come out on the other side of things like this as, having not just survived, but grown. Have you all seen any examples of that? Like what industries or things are happening right now that are, I hate to use the word thriving, but doing well, even what's going on in the macro sense?
Well, liquor stores are probably the best.
Yeah.
How about banks, Al? I mean, banks are right in the middle of all the action. Are they doing well? Or are they just, stressed to the
I mean,
what's it like?
the big difference between this time and the last financial crisis is the last time the banks was sort of blamed for it, and they pretty much caused it. This time around, they're being asked to step up and play an important role in distributing the money and helping people. And frankly, they're better positioned to do it this time around because they have the money, whereas 12 years ago, a lot of them were on the verge of failure. So, I mean, the banks are in a pretty good position, but, they have some challenges because, they make money on lending to customers, and a lot of their customers, this quarter, next quarter might not be able to pay their bills. And so you're already starting to see them set aside a lot of money for potential losses. And, right now they're fine, but, if it's like everything else. People say it all the time. It really depends on how long this lasts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, right, because it's going to trickle down to.
I mean, we're starting to see bank earnings. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joanna.
There's some stress we're starting to see because people aren't spending, anything. They're not using their credit cards as much. They're not buying houses. Starting to see some of that stress, but
yeah, missing car payments.
Otherwise, yeah.
Right. I am seeing, I think New York today reported easing on I think mortgage requirements, right? Kate? I don't know, Katie, I don't want to put you on the spot. I was looking at the Times headlines today. I think.
Yeah, I haven't. Who has time to read the paper, Greg? Don't ask me about mortgages. I'm not going to be your expert on that.
Let's let that one go. How about as we get towards the top of the hour here, I'm curious what you all think is going to be the lingering changes and differences in newsrooms and news coverage on the other side of this, or as it changes back to somewhat more normal circumstances. How will news operations continue to operate maybe differently?
I think I'm going to have trouble getting everyone in at the office at an early hour because everyone's used to get sleeping like.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're seeing that, remote that a lot of work can get done outside of the newsroom. And as the news business continues to suffer from recession, attrition, as it shrinks, I think that this is going to be a data point for people making budgets about how much needs to be put into physical space and travel budgets.
Yeah, right. I think for all business, we're having the same discussion. I know I have some agency friends, and we're all saying, well, when and how would you go back to work? And do you even want to go back to the office? What I was thinking about and then I was thinking after I had that thought about the commercial real estate industry, like that's going to get impacted because we're going to work differently, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from Brock, who runs a nonprofit here in Baltimore. What are we seeing reported on nonprofits and how they're being impacted? Many are being devastated. A lot can't run the annual fundraiser and are probably uncomfortable or having a hard time with their giving programs. Are you all seeing coverages of the nonprofit community, and do you think there could be more?
I'd say, yeah, I've read a lot, and I feel like we could write more. I think, it's like with the business community, it's like it's so big, it's hard to get your arms around. But in my section certainly has written a lot about the impact on arts organizations, which are typically nonprofits, many of which are not going to survive, which are really struggling to find their footing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, yeah, I think there could be more reporting on this. I think it's, with any news story, it's sort of a matter of what can you say that hasn't been said already? What's the new revelation about how bad things are? And if you have a new data point in that regard, pitch it. It's people are still kind of scrambling to make sense of this, and I think that's definitely a part of the equation here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joanna.
I was going to say, I think a lot of them are struggling with how to ask for money when they know that the needs are so great right now and people don't know what their financial situation is going to be like. I think you're seeing that they're trying to figure out, how do I ask without being, crass, or do I wait?
Right. I want to get to one last question here in the Q&A, which is from Tammy, who works at TEDCO, which is the state's economic development support for technology, especially the startup community. She's asking, how about stories? Are stories about organizations investing in startups still good right now?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I think we've seen certainly a lot of financial technology companies, working with the banking industry to kind of help, get money to people faster. The PPP program is a perfect example. Some fintechs have worked with, because some of the banks didn't have the technologies in place to process all those applications, and so fintechs have really stepped up. I definitely think there's room for coverage, that kind of coverage.
All right, we're almost at noon. Maybe a last question and we can sign up. So for everyone who's still on, we'll send out a recording next week, and we can make sure you get that. If there's something you didn't think of, you want to email me, please do, and we can have a dialogue about it, or I can ask from our media panel about it after. And I guess a last question would be, what do you wish people knew about your job or the media, the role of the media that they don't know? Like, are there misconceptions that you want to clear up, or do you wish that people just realize that,
Well, I mean, there's always, it's always true, or it's been true for a long time, that there's the misconception that we are creating the story, not covering the story. And that, and that we have some sort of agenda, political, economic, or otherwise. And I've never seen it to be true, really, among anyone I've ever worked with in all my years. And right now, I think, you know, I think people are working really, really hard, and in some cases at personal risk to their own health and well-being to show people what's happening. And you know, you want consumers of news to be skeptical and to, you know, not just accept information at face value, but you know, a general consideration that we're doing our best and we're trying to show you what's happening, not create something. You know, that would be great.
Thanks, Kate. Anyone else, quick comment on that or anything else they want to share?
I think what I've seen with my staff is they get a little exhausted because they're talking to people who are in such dire straits right now. So it does affect us sometimes personally because, you know, we're not, you know, robots. You know, you're hearing every day, my business is not going to make it, you know, people that we've known for years who own businesses. So it's definitely, they need to step away a little bit as well because this has been tough on them, I think, mentally.
Yeah.
I've seen that with some of the reporters.
Thank you, Joanna. I should probably wrap because if people had a noon meeting, they're going to need to get to it. Or let's keep on track. Amy, I want to mention for you, there was a shout out to a photographer at the Post.
Saw that, Jabin Botsford, yeah, who's been doing great work. You know, this is no secret. We've actually written about this, but the Post is not sending a reporter on a daily basis to the White House press briefings. And a lot of that has to do with, you know, cost benefit. Are you actually getting news out of it that you can't cover off of TV? And you know, are you putting a reporter's health at risk? And yet we are still sending a photographer to every one of those briefings. And I can tell you, as someone who's often having to find a photo from a press briefing to illustrate one of our media stories, it's like, I'm thinking about this all the time. It's like, wow, Jabin's there. And our photographers are really, you know, they're sort of essential personnel. They're out there. They found all kinds of workarounds, as Greg's brother-in-law can attest. You know, you see a lot of portraits that are shot from a distance, a lot of zoom lenses. Yeah, our reporters are staying at home. Our photographers are out there.
All right, thank you. I should probably wrap it. I wanted to just thank everyone from taking time from your busy schedules. I know you all are very working in pretty intense environments, so thanks for taking some time.
Great questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Greg, for organizing.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for attending.
Great
We'll
seeing
follow up with you.
See ya.
Bye, guys.